oh, what's the big deal? It's just a big deal. It's just, and again, your audience is probably thinking, well, what's the big deal? It's just a little historical artifact. And London, of course, one of the great major cities of the world. Why not? Okay. But here's where the thing gets creepy. They opened it. They aligned the opening and the unveiling of it to correspond with Beltane, Beltane. Your viewers can look all of that up, and that literally translates to the fires of Baal. And it is an internationally recognized celebration of Baal. It's their holiday. It's
like a Halloween.
Yeah, it's like a Halloween, if you will. Here's what comes right out of the headline news that so many people missed. And again, it's hiding in plain sight. When I first start describing it, your audience might think, well, there's really nothing to that. But then listen to exactly what happened and how it happened. So, Arab Spring, we've spoken of that before, it breaks out and all of this collapse starts happening. Civil war in Syria is just horrific. One of the things that happened in Syria was when ISIS was really thick and heavy and really heavy-handed in that area and controlling of that area, they were destroying as many ancient artifacts as they could that they felt was completely opposed to their Islamic worldview. So one of the things that they destroyed was a temple of Baal built by the Romans during the Roman Empire, which was still there, and the archway that represented the gateway going into the temple. Now, they destroyed it. It used to be a huge tourist attraction. You know, like you can go to Israel today and there's stuff from 2,000 years ago. People come and they see it. Well, Syria and other parts of the Middle East, Turkey is a big tourist area, the Mediterranean. Syria had some tourist attractions. That was one of them, the ancient Temple of Baal built by the Romans. Well, ISIS came in, started destroying everything they could get their hands on. Christian, pagan, didn't matter, anything. That was one of the things they destroyed. This was in Palmyra, Syria, okay? Now, the archway, they left for a while, but then eventually they destroyed that too. So what happened is this group of people, and I can't remember the name of the group, but again, this was carried in mainstream media because it was announced they were going to first bring it to New York City. But this group of people, kind of under the guise of archaeology and historical preservation, and I say under the guise, I think some of them were very sincere about that. In other words, they were just infuriated by these ancient relics of tourist attraction and ancient history that were just summarily destroyed, okay? And so they wanted to try to recreate them. Well, recreating the whole Temple of Baal was a little too big of a project, but they did recreate what's called the Palmyra Arch, or the archway, the Baal archway. Now, what that represents, by the way, the replication is 11 tons and it's 5 stories tall.
Wow.
So I mean,
So it's big.
Yeah, and it's to scale. Yeah, it's not just some little 8-foot arch that you walk through. No, this is a huge dedication to Baal worship. And the way the thing was originally structured is that this archway represented literally a portal entering from one dimension to the next. Now, I know people say, well, that sounds like science fiction. Well, actually, there's a study of quantum mechanics and all of that. I mean, we understand that there are multiple dimensions of reality. The Word of God speaks of that as well. But the Baal worship, Satan literally put it upon the hearts and minds of the worshipers to build this arch. So you had, before you could approach the temple, you had to go through there, and you were representing, I'm now sanctifying myself. I'm coming into the presence of Baal. You know, it's everything God does, Satan perverts and copycats and mimics and counterfeits.
Mm-hmm.
So the temple, on the Temple Mount, you know, there was the outer courts, and then the inner sanctuary, then the Holy of Holies, and the priest had to prepare themselves as they came, and then only one priest could go into the Holy of Holies. Well, see, Satan kind of replicates all of that. So he's got the archway where you have to come through that first, and then you go in. All right, so what they did was they rebuilt and replicated the arch. Then in 2016, it was announced, this is in early 2016, I think January, February, something like that. New York Times headline article, other world publications, national publications, Washington Post, The Temple of Baal is coming to Times Square. That was the headline. Something very close to that. I'm paraphrasing, but that literally was that. The Temple of Baal will be erected in Times Square. Well, that headline, really infuriated a lot of people. There was an outcry. I mean, the whole evangelical Christian community said, what? And then even people in New York City, even if they weren't believers or, Bible-believing Christians, they were kind of freaked out by that. So there was such an outcry that they backed off and said, no, well, we'll do something else. We won't do that. But so what happened was they changed the wording, because it really wasn't the Temple of Baal, but it was the archway that represented coming into the presence of Baal. So what they did, just a few months later, they opened with this production in London, okay? Now, their headline was, we want to take this on a world tour to show the world this relic that we've had to recreate to show you what, nasty ISIS did. And then their theme was, because this represents freedom. Well, if you go back into the ancient historical writings of the worship of Baal, that's right. That's exactly what it represents. So again, hiding in plain sight. This represents freedom. And then they said it represents victory. And then they said this will show that ISIS can never win. Well, an arch to Baal is representative that ISIS cannot win? That didn't even make sense. No. But what they did was, they couldn't get it into New York City. And by the way, it wasn't the Temple of Baal, but that's what the headline said, and that's what everybody reacted to. It was this archway. So they opened it in London, the #1 economic capital of the European Union then, before Brexit started, and also #1 or #2 economic capital of the world. In New York City and London are constantly back and forth on that. And so they opened it there. And again, your audience is probably thinking, well, what's the big deal? It's just a little historical artifact. And London, of course, one of the great major cities of the world. Why not? Okay. But here's where the thing gets creepy. They opened it. They aligned the opening and the unveiling of it to correspond with Beltane, Beltane. Your viewers can look all of that up, and that literally translates to the fires of Baal, and it is an internationally recognized celebration of Baal. It's their holiday. It's like a Halloween. It's like a Halloween, if you will. Okay. And so, in the fires of Baal, Beltane, that's what the celebration is called. That goes back to the fires of infant sacrifice in the Old Testament. Beltane, that's what it means. So they unveiled this thing in honor. Now you say, well, maybe they didn't know what they were doing, but just watch. But they unveiled this thing in honor of Baal and the fires of Baal on the day of Beltane in London, the economic capital of the world and of the European Union, and we know how all those might tie into prophecy. And so here it is. There's the first unveiling. They tried to do it in New York City first. Well, what's in New York City? Well, the United Nations, Ground Zero, another economic capital of the world. If not #1, it's #2. I mean, right there with London. So they opened it in London. They kind of stilled the waters back in America. Then they redid the headline. And they said, the Palmyra Arch. They didn't even put the word Baal in it. The Palmyra Arch, the historical artifact, will be on display in New York City. And everybody went, oh, that's cool. You see?
It's like bringing a Ramesses from ancient Egypt display through and coming through through the museums and
all that. That's right. So, but then what they did, they took the same thing that everybody reacted. They bring it to New York City, home of the United Nations. Now, I'm emphasizing this because it's going to go a couple of other places, too, on this world tour. In every place, I'll go ahead and give it away, every place they take it is a globalist, economic, financial power center, which is what Baal worship is all about. Power and wealth and freedom. And that's what they're declaring. So they move it from London. Then some weeks later, a month and a half later, they take it to New York. Now it's not called the Temple of Baal. It's not even called the Arch of Baal. It's called the Palmyra Arch. And it's a historical display, but they display it now in a park right across from City Hall in New York, which is just a block or two away from Ground Zero and not too far from the United Nations. So it's right there. And the mayor comes out, makes a big speech about how this represents freedom. And they never say, freedom from what? What are you talking about? But again, the historical understanding of the worship of Baal, that was the theme. Freedom from Yahweh, freedom from the Lord, freedom from his regulations, freedom from his law, freedom from his word. All right, so they unveil it in New York. Well, by the time it gets to New York and people like us are watching this, and I was not the only one to see this, I was one that was outspoken early on, but there were many others too. They first saw it in London, opened on Beltane, and they said, that's pushing it just a little. I mean, if it's just going to be a historical display, you just want to display, like you said, Ramses and all that, that's fine. But you purposely time it for Beltane, then you bring it to New York, this economic engine, the center of world power, the United Nations, this economic engine of the United States, the number one superpower. You put it just a few blocks from Ground Zero. You put it right in front of City Hall. I mean, now it's a little more in your face. The next place they took it was to Dubai.
That makes sense.
They took it to Dubai, and they coordinated it with the opening of the World Governance Summit. 4,000 people from 130 nations of the world, world leaders were there. Big name people, Elon Musk, speaker, and a bunch of globalists. They were all the speakers. Barack Obama was there. Barack Obama was a part of helping to get the World Governance Council started. One of their themes in the headline news was one of the spokespeople for it said, well, what we're trying to do is to bring all the nations of the world together under one umbrella. And I'm going to put quotes because that's a quote. I'm quoting. That's what this is about. Bringing all the nations of the world together under one umbrella. Well,
that's scary.
Well, that's the Antichrist spirit. That's the globalist spirit. Okay, so now follow the trail because it goes one more place. London on Beltane, New York, United Nations, Ground Zero, world's most powerful superpower nation, economy, money, power, everything that goes with it. Dubai, the gateway between Africa, Asia, in Europe, the financial center of that whole area. What's happening there? The World Governance Council. How did the World Governance Council open? With the unveiling of the Arch of Baal. It was all a part of the ceremony. So that happens now. People like me and others, now we're watching then I'm starting to write about it. And other people writing about it saying, this is in your face. Mm-hmm. This is in your face. It's like Satan's taking a victory march of the power centers of the world. He said, it's kind of, you know how we do as kids, put a basket full of rolls on the table and there's 100 people around the table and we go, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. We touch all the rolls because nobody else will want to touch it if we touch it. That little children's game we play. That's how I compared this. It's like Satan saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. London's mine, New York's mine, Dubai's mine, World Governance Council, the United Nations, Beltane, the power, the money, the control. These are mine, head of the UN, European Union, the most influential nation of the world, Dubai, the New York of Middle East, if you will. Then, a few months later, it goes to Florence, Italy, at the opening of the G7 conference. Another kind of United Nations, many people believe a globalist-minded institution. And they opened the G7 conference with the ceremony to the Arch. So, I know people listening to this can say, well, maybe you're just reading too much into it. Maybe I am, but I don't think so. Because I know what the scriptures say about the last days. And the scriptures don't use these words, but this is what it says. The hiding in plain sight of the demonic yes. outpouring. There will be, Paul says, the Spirit clearly says in the last days that there will be a demonic, and he doesn't use the word outpouring, but that's what it means, that will lead to apostasy and will also lead to seducing spirits that will just kind of sweep and capture the world, will seduce the world. And that's where we are, guys. And so this was a hiding in plain sight. I said Baal takes a victory tour is what I wrote about and talked about. And he's just saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And those four places kind of represent the power control structures of the world. And it was all done under the guise of, well, we're just presenting a historical artifact. Yeah, but why in those places? And why does there have to be a ceremony attached to the opening of globalist agenda things? Why did it have to be on Beltane, the celebrating of killing your children in the fire?
Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend.